people. So it's got a number of titles for this particular story. You guys, like, when Graham says that I turn up a lot, because I'm not always telling you about the storytelling and the fairy tales, and that's what I'm doing. But in the glory years of the collection of folklore in Australia, you had Hugh Anderson and Dawn. So, Rob, would you agree that, you know, like, Hugh is doing all the work and Dawn's just sitting in the passenger seat going along the ride? Yes? So we're going around doing the collections, and what are they doing? They're going to be collecting music, right? Because that's the only thing that there is to collect. So they come along and... Hold on, where am I going? There we go. Now... Can I get this? Oh.
You've got Simon McDonald there, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm trying to play the video, and it's not playing. Okay, again, talking amongst myself. Right, okay, so it is an ABC recording of this man, Simon McDonald, born out in the sticks in Victoria, did a bit of this, did a bit of that, you know, potato collector, pig herder, you know, all sorts of things. Not much education, but at his mother's and grandmother's and family's knee, collected a lot of the songs. So that particular video has a lot from the Lumsdens collecting it. But it was Hugh and Dawn Anderson who collected his story, all his biography and the songs and so on that he could remember, you know, the old bark hat and all that sort of thing. And then right at the back in the appendix, there's a story that he remembered his old Irish grandmother telling him. Right, so long before, so 1906, so let's say about 1912, 1914, he's sitting at his old Irish grandmother's knee and she's telling him a story that she remembers from the old country. So what's that, another 40 years that we're adding to the memory there out of our face. But he remembers it brilliantly. Sort of. And she remembers it so well as well, because she's got, like, her memories are a little bit faulty over time. But this is actually a gift, and you're trying to come up with a new folk tale. So if you've got stories that are just passed on exactly, then we'd have an Irish folk tale told in Australia. But if it gets changed by the people who tell it and the people who hear it and the way they understand the meaning of the story, then it's going to be shaped from the country of origin to the country of reception, and you end up with an Australian folk tale or fairy tale. And that's what we have here. Hold on. So, when I have told this story, I took out a lot, so it only took 20 minutes to tell. I'm just going to do the bare bones, okay? So everybody just relax. All right, so we start off, we've got a mother with 3 sons, and she wants them to get out. She's sick of feeding them. They don't want to go. Yep, this is an ancient story, mind you. So she comes up with a cunning plan. She's going to have, let's have a card game, shall we, boys? And she sits them down and she plays the card, and they're winning. It's going so well. And the first son wins the card game, and he says, and everybody who wins gets a wish. That would be the geisa in the ancient Irish stories. A wish. First son, I want food and drink on the table. Second son, I want food and drink on the table. Third son says, I'll just hold back on my wish. And then all of a sudden her luck turns and she wins, and she says, I want you all out of here to go on the quest to hunt for the great entire, the black entire, which is a gilded horse, Brian O'Ville of the underworld. You must seek into the underworld and bring it down. That is what I lay upon you. But remember, the third son has an opportunity. He can gather up, he's got his last wish. What's his wish going to be? So obvious. I want you to stand up on the steeple while we're gone with a sheaf of wheat under one arm and a needle under the other, and you must stay there until we return. Probably you would have said the same. So, three boys go off, and she says, all right, I'm willing to do all of that, and because you've been such good boys, I'll give each of you a horse, a hawk, and a hound to go with you. So the three boys go off, waving goodbye to Mama, sitting up there on the steeple with the wheat and the needle. And they head off. They're going in different directions, as three sons always do. But one of them goes along and they're cold and they're tired and they're hungry. And they see a flock of sheep being drove along. So one of those sheep falls off the back of the truck. So he's cooking his mutton in there when there's a knock on the door. And it's a little old lady there. I'm cold, I'm weak, can I come in? And he says, oh yes. And she says, oh, I would like just a sup of it, but I am so worried about your hawk, your hound and your horse. Will you take my 3 hairs, bing, 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 and tie them up? They're fine, they're fine. Oh, well, old woman, if it'll make you happy, ties them up. And then she eats a bit of the meat, she gets stronger. She eats a bit more of the meat, she gets stronger. She eats more of the meat, she is ravenously hungry. And he calls for the horse, the hawk and the hound to defend him as she's rising up against him, for she was indeed a witch. But the horse, the hawk and the hound cannot move because her witch's hairs were holding them fast. Repeat the second son. But the third son has taken some rushes from the river. So when the old woman has said to him, I want you to hold up, tie them up with my hairs, he in fact ties them up with rushes. So that when she is raging up above him and she calls for the hairs, they say, how can I help you when I burn behind the fire? And in fact, he is victorious. So, I forgot what happened to the 2 sons first. As you do, if you are a witch about to destroy these 2 boys, she chopped off their heads, and their heads went rolling away, and the 2 boys were left as stumps of wood in the cottage. But this does not happen to our 3rd son. No, because he has got all that power. And as he strikes at her head goes rolling up, and he gets a stick and hits it so that her head goes up. And she said, oh, if you hadn't done that, my head would have landed back on my shoulders. I never would have been killed forevermore. But now that you've done that, all you need to do is hit your brother's heads, and they'll be back on their heads, and they'll be revived. And then, away goes her head, and there goes the witch. So, are you following me? Okay, so then we've got the 3 sons ready, and off they go, riding along, horse, hawk, hound. They're going off there. And as they do, a man, small and dark, steps out from the bushes. A swaggy, says our son at McDonald. A swaggy comes out of the bushes, and he asks the first 2 sons, what are they doing? They say, mind your own business, you silly old man. But Jack, the 3rd son, he's kind. He says, oh, we're going into the underworld to find the black entire. He says, well, as a matter of fact, you've asked the very person who can help you. I happen to know that the black entire, the greatest horse in all the world, is held in the underworld by the 3 rottenest witches that have ever been. I can help you. So, oh, this is great. So they go to the underworld, and it turns out, says Simon MacDonald, that to get to the underworld, you go down a gully and you enter an old mine shaft. And then and it stops them and says, no, you can stay there. I will go down into the stables. And says, but you'll be caught by the witches. No. He says, I'll transform myself into a rooster. Anybody's planning a career in the horse theft, that is the missing link. So he goes down there, and and as he grabs for the horse, it will neigh fit to shake all the world. And then the old mother witch calls out, there's somebody trying to steal it, and the 2 daughters will go in, and I couldn't see anything except an old rooster sitting on the bank. They do that 3 more times, but the last time she puts on her thinking cap, and her thoughts go around the world 3 times. She says, I know who it is. It's the Gothy Duff, the black thief. He is the one who's down there. And so they capture him, and then she says, and the thoughts go around the world 3 times, and there are the 3 other thieves, the accomplices, waiting outside. So they're captured. And she and the 2 daughters, the 3 witches, say, right, they are all going to die. But the Gothy Duff leans forward. He says, no. How can you sentence us to death for horse theft when the horse is still here? That's very, and she says, and why should I grant you freedom even if I still have the horse? To do that you would have to give me the greatest treasure there is, a story. And so he tells 3 stories. With each one of the stories, one of the sons is set free until it's the last story to be told. And so he must tell a story of his own life. And he tells about the greatest theft he did, the time he tricked an ogre, a giant. And that was when he found a young woman weeping over her baby in the forest because she was married to a cannibalistic ogre, and he was ready to, and he got tired of killing strangers and eating them, and now he wanted to eat their daughter, and she didn't know what to do. So he said, don't worry about it. All you need to do is cook his favourite dog, and if ever he asks for a particular part of the body, you just say, you've eaten it. And so she cooked the dog, and he was eating it, and he was asking for the fingers or the toes, and she said, I've just eaten it. And he said, never mind. Eats the dog, very happy that he's eaten the daughter. And once the giant has fallen asleep, the young woman and the daughter escape. And that, says the Gothy Duff, is the greatest trickery I ever did in my life. Isn't that a grand story? She says, it is, because it's my story. I was the mother who you saved, and these are my daughters are the ones that you rescued from their villainous father, and in return you can have your freedom for all of you, and the black attire, and all the silver and gold here in the underworld. And so they return to the upper world's victory and glory, and the Gothy Duff, the black duff, thief, vanishes into bushland, never to be seen again. And the 3 boys go riding home happily with the black and tie behind them, and they see their mother up on the steeple there with the wheat and the needles there, and she is so astonished to see them still alive that she falls off the steeple, splat! She's dead. So they drink tea until their faces turn black, and if they do not live happy, then may we. It's one heck of a story, you know, like they say in the court gesture, of plot we have a lot. Because it turns out she'd actually mashed 2 stories together. So we've got a whole lot more that's going on there. So, can you see this? This is, look at me, I've done research. So, when we're looking at all these stories, so you've got ATU, that's the Arnie Thompson Youth Index for story types. And there's ATU 953 is the robber tells sons, robber and his sons tell stories. But that's only one chunk of the story, it's an insert. And to have those 3 stories within, which in fact Simon MacDonald forgot. He couldn't remember any of those stories, just the last bit of it. So when we're looking at them, they're all Irish, Scottish, Breton versions of the stories, though it does go back, there's a Greek origin story as well. And when you start to break it down, there are different elements that lean back way much further into ancient Greek stories. So when you're looking at, so this is our story that Simon MacDonald passed on, with a little bit of the things that got changed. And that mostly the Black Thief and the Knight of the Glen, which you can find in Andrew Lang's Red Fairy book. And that's got the Irish version, and you've got Connell Yellowclaw, which is in Joseph Jacobs' book. Now, I am not a clever researcher, I would not have been looking at this 1974 book. What I look for is a much more important book that I hope you all have. This is the source of all wisdom, my friend. This is where you find the beginnings of so many mysteries.
Check's in the mail.
Yes, do you have have a stock to sell?
Yeah,
Is that
maybe
what
fine.
it does? Yeah, okay. So it seems generally we've got most of the plot points there, and if you mash it up with the horse, the hawk and the hound, you can probably get most of them. But it does seem at least 2, possibly 3 of those Celtic stories have been meshed into MacDonald's grandmother's memory when she's passing it on, with him forgetting things. But not only forgetting things, but as well as including elements of those stories. And I just point out that when you're looking at those dates of the collections, it doesn't feel like a 19th century story, does it? It feels really medieval. It's got a lot of the old Celtic origins somewhere there, but I haven't been able to find. I could find Greek stories that are connected to it, but I haven't seen anything in the chain or the Fenian cycle that would be a direct connection. But it is, like I said, Breton, Scotland, Ireland are the sources for most of these stories there. So therefore, but of course, the little Aussie grandson, he's hearing this very Irish story, and he can only hear it according to his own understanding of the world, which is when you get that alchemy of taking what was and creating what is, what belongs to this place and our people. So, just in passing, so when you're looking at the names there, the Gothy Duff, I love, is his understanding of a Gaelic term. So when you've got Duff, or Doof, that's black, as in Dublin, Black River. He's hearing her speak the Gaelic, but and the way he remembers it is the Gothy Duff. So if you put Gothy Duff into Google, you'll just get Hilary Duff and things like that. It's not a word that exists or a term that exists outside that. The other thing I'd point out, so in Graham's hallowed book, or in Anderson's hallowed book, the way they're describing is the witch's tale, as in one witch, but there's no one witch in the story. There's a whole lot of different ways you can unfold them. I mean, are there 3 different witches who are meeting the brothers when they're doing the hair tying? Or is it the same witch getting stronger each time? And are those 3 witches the same as the mother and the 2 daughters? Or, and then is the mother on the steeple, is she one of the witches? And is the Gothy Duff actually the missing father of the 3 sons? Yeah, so this is I don't think Simon asked his grandmother these questions. So, looking back, one of the reasons that I find fairy tales such a rich doorway genre is because they are so linked to the myths and or legends that have gone before, and then you get the traces, and they are meant to be reworked every generation or every century. You're going to have reusage, re-understandings of them. So from that Celtic, and I'm saying medieval or Celtic Dark Ages origin, just from the vibe, it's like Mabo and the Constitution, it's just the vibe, that sort of thing, you can glean back there. So if we've got any journey to or death from the underworld, so the underworld is often death, and so a journey into it is by a great hero who can go into death and confront death and return unharmed. And a lot of those, they're called the katabasis, is a Greek term. If you go down there, it will usually be to rescue a lost soul, like Orpheus, for instance. But it will also be a theft. So if you say that the underworld is not so much death, but the interior, that theft of wisdom, of fire, of knowledge, of sin, that sort of thing. So Prometheus stealing fire, and you'll find different versions of that sort of stealing light, stealing fire, stealing from the heavens to make us immortal and knowledgeable. You'll find that in a lot of indigenous cultures around the world. I'm thinking of North American, Native American stories there as well. So that sort of idea of going into the underworld to find what treasure it may be, but the treasure is going to change depending on the culture. It's Ireland, so a horse is the greatest treasure that you could have. So when you're looking at the trickster or thief, if you Google things about fairy tales, they'll say things like, fairy tales are designed to teach moral lessons to children. Like the morality is somewhat dubious because stealing is almost always right in fairy tales. It's what heroes do. And it's about the trickery, it's the wisdom. So more fairy tales have winning by deceit than by violence. And a lot of that is about women's stories, but it's also storytellers win by deceit too. We steal your attention with our lies. So you've got the trickster or the thief. So again, in one of the versions of the story, but Simon MacDonald didn't remember it. One of those three stories was one was about cats stealing things and holding someone hostage, but another one was the Polyphemus story about escaping from being held prisoner. You've got Jason is sent by a malevolent figure to go onto an impossible task, a quest, just as the mother and or stepmother has done with the three sons. And then you've got Medea, who is the magical helper, like the ogre's, the witch's daughter or something like that. But she's the Black Queen who's able to get the golden fleece for them. So magical helpers, and you find them, they're the threshold guardians, so that's known as the psychopomp, is going to be the guardian and taking you down into the underworld to discover it. They'll give you the secrets of how to get through. So Gilgamesh, had a psychopomp who's trying to have the way to go through to get the secret of eternal life. And it's a very popular archetype in fairy tales there. The witches are a flip side of that. They are women of power, women of wisdom. And for fairy tales, the French fairy tales are going to create stories that have got a lot of strong women because they were creating the stories as a subversive force. But the Grimms hated strong women, so they turned all those fairy godmother strong women and strong knowledge figures into witches that needed to be destroyed. Hence, women falling off steeples, which can be a crucifix or not. Okay, so, now horses are fabulous. So horses are swift as thought, and they can form a bridge between heaven and earth. They're going to leap there. So they've got all that meaning. So you've got Henwood is King Arthur's horse. You've got Odin's horse has 8 legs. You've got the Kelpie, which is a water horse, completely different from a sea horse. So you've got all that as running alongside the purely cultural connection that the Irish have with horsepower. The roosters are a really cool one. They're the harbingers of the new day, so new life, resurrection, all that sort of thing. But they're also symbols of truth-telling as well. And in Celtic, a lot of Celtic stories, they're also the guardians that take the souls of the warriors into the other world. You've got and then you've got the motif of having stories, telling stories to keep yourself alive. That you get with Scheherazade for the 1001 Arabian Nights, Odysseus telling the most magical of stories, just making things up because stories equal life, as well as being that bridge, that line, that deception that will steal attention and steal all your treasures. So when we are looking at the Australian versions, you can see that a lot of it is about class. So what had been in the Irish and Scottish versions, there'd been great kings and queens, and there'd be kidnappings between them and wings and treaties and so on. All of that is going to be transformed into a working class Irish mother, I'm thinking half of the South as being an example. You don't need to have a wicked or jealous stepmother. You just need to have somebody whose kids are eating her out of house and home. You don't need to have a horse that is magical, because any horse is valuable, and that's all you need to know, that you can get a treasure just from the horse. And then you're looking at the sheep. Now, the sheep were not necessarily part of the original Celtic stories, but they come there. So you've got all the ideas of the droving and how that motif has been resurrected by the Australia Day Lamb ads, that just how much that can be used to signify Australianness and our relation to property and to the borrowing, the thefts going on there. And again, quite directly from what Irish heritage mainstream Australian culture has, you've got the trickster thieves, the people who are on side because they see a curvy path to get the black and tan, the treasure from the underworld. And you can see that very strongly with the bushranger traditions and how the common people would support them in that. And also how much we love an escape story. Not necessarily in our neighbourhood, but in the past, in somebody else's neighbourhood, an escape is a great story, because you've got that theft of freedom, that gift that's going on. So you've got the merging and the plaiting together of these different themes. And when you get to the Guide to the Underworld, for young Aussie Simon, he's seeing the black thief, the Gothy Duff, as a swag. And the swaggies and the hawkers are the ones who do know their way around. They're the ones who are carrying the stories from community, from outpost to outpost, weaving a community together with the shared tales. And if the tales get rewoven in the telling, well, then that will just bind us closer together. So, when we go into the underworld, not surprisingly, we're looking at Golda. I find that perhaps the most charming thing of all, that an underworld will just be to dive down into the depths. And you've got lots of different meanings that we can carry that through. The gold bills, of course, are most obvious. But you've got, like the opal, like Lightning Ridge and Cooper Pedy, you've got criminal underworlds, which leans back into the other one. So we've got all those different stories or different connections that gave a gateway for an Australian listening to an Irish story to make it their own, to reverence what's gone before, to hold on to those truths and those meanings buried in the layers of language, and then to create more that makes the story for him. And as Graham started off with, the only mystery is, why is this the only one we have?